Hello, and welcome to The Brief, a video podcast that offers alternative voices not always available from the mainstream media, voices that offer different perspectives and a different approach to the solutions of current global issues. I'm your host, Jim Clancy. As always, we do appreciate a like or a follow, and you can find more about our episodes at thebriefpodcast.org. Now, I've covered the Middle East and specifically the Israeli-Palestinian predicament for more than 4 decades, going all the way back to Beirut in the summer of 1982. I've interviewed almost all the major players from Yasser Arafat to Ariel Sharon and far beyond. I flew with Arafat aboard his private jet and talked at length with Mahmoud Abbas. Today, we're witnessing a genocide in real time in Gaza, and the world has been slow to react. An indifference, a silence, really, that has contributed to the loss of tens upon tens of thousands of lives of Israelis and Palestinians. Israelis are still being held hostage. Starving Palestinians, civilians for the most part, are being killed as they scramble for completely inadequate food aid, and Israeli bombings have utterly destroyed Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu says he has a plan to control Gaza, oust Hamas, and restore calm. I know him, too. He's told me to my face that his goal was always to stop any peace process. He has done that for decades as Prime Minister of Israel. In this episode of the Brief Podcast, we're joined by Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, an economist first and foremost, but also a powerful voice in international politics. He leads the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. He, too, has a plan for Gaza and an end to decades of bloodshed and violence. Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, hello, and welcome to The Brief.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well, good to have you. Now, you have a plan that you want to put forward to try to solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem, one that has just been the graveyard of foreign diplomacy for one American president after another. Why now?
Well, first of all, it's not really anything very original. My whole point is that more than 180 countries at the UN are saying 2 states, side by side, on the internationally, legally recognized lines of the 4th of June, 1967. Last year, the International Court of Justice said Israel's occupation of Palestine is illegal. As we speak, Israel is committing a genocide. It is starving 2 million people to death. The behavior is beyond conscionable, beyond imaginable, frankly. The United States has stood by Israel's side every step of the way for reasons that are partly known and are, frankly, partly mysterious. Why can't the U.S. have its own foreign policy when the American people right now, roughly by a ratio of 2-to-1, support the Palestinian cause over what Israel is doing? But we don't. But almost every other country in the world does support the 2-state solution. My basic idea, by the way, is nothing profound, but that the 2-state solution should be voted at the start of any kind of peace process, not at the end. What we have done for decades is say to Israel, you have a veto. This is up to you. Israel has said, well, thank you very much. We veto. We don't want a Palestinian state. The government that's in charge in Israel right now, led by Netanyahu, comes from a political movement and a political party which has made no bones about it. From the founding charter of the Likud party, which is Netanyahu's party, it is said that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Israel will be sovereign. In other words, there's no place for Palestine in this. What is the result? Since there are 8 million Palestinian Arabs, it is that Israel now is trying to murder them, to expel them, to starve them into submission, to do God knows what else. But the result is crimes against humanity and spreading war. Why spreading war? Because, frankly, throughout the Middle East, people don't like the genocide against the Palestinian Arabs. They resist. They support militancy. People are dying in large numbers. Recorded deaths of more than 60,000 Palestinians, and no doubt countless more that have not yet been named and counted. And across the Middle East, governments and individuals say no. Then Israel's response is invade neighboring countries, invade Syria, invade Lebanon. Netanyahu told the United States to invade Iraq in 2003, and the U.S. president said, yes, sir. It told Trump, bomb Iran. Yes, sir. And this is why we have spreading war, genocide, and no solution. So my view is, well, it's not going to work, my view, because the United States foreign policy is so profoundly compromised and in the hands of Israeli zealotry and extremism that Trump and the U.S. government are just the veto to peace. People should understand that what you need for membership in the United Nations as a sovereign state is 2 votes, one in the UN Security Council and one in the General Assembly. In the General Assembly, the vote would be 185 countries to maybe 8 in opposition. That would be the U.S., Israel, maybe Argentina, Paraguay, Vanuatu, Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, another island or 2. But 95% of the world would say yes. But in the UN Security Council, there's a veto, the U.S. And the U.S. has vetoed Palestine's statehood in the UN system forever, basically. And I thought at the beginning of the year that Trump just might really want peace. And so I recommended that the U.S. change its veto to a plus vote alongside the rest of the world. I said that this would save Israel, not hurt Israel, that this would align the United States with the global diplomacy. For moments, I had some hope that they would do this. I don't really have hope that the U.S. is going to change its view right now. The U.S. leadership seems to be content to be an agent of genocide.
You know, I understand all of these points that you are making here. The reality that Americans have to understand, it's not just the Security Council, it's not just the votes that go and Mr. Netanyahu, it's the control that AIPAC has in the United States. Very powerful lobby. Yes. That keeps the lawmakers in line. In fact, a string of Democrats and Republicans both went to visit Israel. It's a propaganda junket where they're all being steeped in these promises that, well, just one more war and Netanyahu can bail it all out and bring us a peaceful Gaza. But it's not going to happen, is it? Because as long as there's an occupation, there's going to be a resistance. It may not be called Hamas, but it'll be called something.
There are probably 4 reasons why U.S. foreign policy is completely subservient to Israeli extremism. One is AIPAC, the lobby which puts in lots of money into the hands or the pockets of Congress. Our Congress, everybody knows, is just bought and sold. They go cheap. They're pretty pathetic. And they take their handouts from AIPAC and they vote with it. Second, and relatedly, is the quite sizable evangelical Christian movement, which bases its support for Israel on the book of Revelation. Again, people have come to understand this. A substantial part of Trump's voter base are evangelical Christians who maybe hate the Jews, whatever, but they read in the book of Revelations that the Jews must gather in the Holy Land in order for the second coming of Christ. So in that book of Revelations, the Jews in the end are extinguished or baptized, whatever they are. It's they don't stay Jews. But the Christian evangelical voter base in the U.S., which is tens of millions of people, are a big part of the unconditional U.S. support. A third component is the military-industrial complex. The CIA and Mossad have been in locked arms for decades. The Mossad is part of the CIA, and the CIA is part of Mossad. This goes back to James Angleton and his counterparts in Mossad. This has been a high-level operation for many, many decades. It seems pretty clear that the CIA, or at least Angleton and his part of the CIA, helped Israel to become a nuclear power, actually, in the 1960s against the law and the wishes of President Kennedy, for example. So this is a relationship that goes way back. Mossad is a killer machine. They assassinate leaders around the world. They do the CIA's dirty business. So this is a very strong relationship. And the fourth is probably blackmail. The Epstein files probably is part of a blackmail sting operation against a lot of powerful political figures in the United States. There's good reason to believe that Epstein was a Mossad agent. That's not some crazy theory. That's a pretty well-established idea. I think there's probably truth to that.
How is that well established? I have heard the accusation many times. He got, apparently, a lot of the money that he was entrusted with belonged to the developer of Victoria's Secret. And he got
Wexner.
Billions that way, millions or billions, and he developed it.
Yeah. So it seems that all of his backers were staunch Zionists to begin with. Second, he was meeting quite regularly with Israeli leaders. This is second. Third, his counterpart, his chief associate in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, was the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who on very pervasive authority was a Mossad agent himself, probably killed by the Mossad in the end when he was somehow, quote, fell off his boat and drowned. So there's Mossad all over the place. There's Israel all over the place with Epstein. And suddenly there are no files. It's amazing.
Yeah, they disappeared. Despite the fact there were a safe full of videos and, we shouldn't be looking at those. This is Trump's own problem now. And he's doing so much to divert attention. His latest move is to take over the police department in Washington, D.C. because there's a crisis
that's a
there.
very serious move, by the way.
Well, it's a crisis he's invented to distract attention away from the Epstein files, and I don't think it's even going to come close to working.
I think the takeover of Washington may be more serious than that because he now has the military and police control over the federal political institutions. Go back to January 6th, 2021. Go back to the control over the police force. Go back to threats, implicit or otherwise, against any kind of political opposition to Trump. I think the move is something more than fighting crime and something more than diversion and street crime. I think it's probably quite serious.
Well, certainly the people in Washington are taking it seriously. But you recently described him, President Donald Trump, as the worst, most dangerous president in U.S. history.
I keep saying that about each one that comes because one after the other, they shock me in their incompetence and in their venality and in their militarism. I had no kind words to say about Biden. I want to be clear. I'm not partisan at all in this regard. I've regarded every president since the end of the Cold War. So I'm talking about Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2. I've regarded them all as failures in the core function that they have, which is to keep America safe and secure. Our country's become more and more vulnerable to nuclear war because of the provocations of all of these presidents in launching wars all over the world and in getting into major confrontations, especially with Russia and now increasingly with China. So I want to be clear, I'm not a partisan in this. I'm not holding my breath that, in the midterms it's going to swing back to the Democrats and save everything. I think our political system is in really bad shape.
Well, we have watched Gaza unfold. Unprecedented in my lifetime to see this kind of slaughter of civilians.
Yes.
To hear the anecdotal stories of doctors, of journalists who say that children are being sniped, that it's almost a game, that, we have videos of Israeli troops celebrating the destruction of people's homes. They set out to do all of this, and yet the world, for the most part, silence. The world has looked away. How are we even capable of that after the experience of the Holocaust and World War II? When we heard everybody always saying, and they do it every year, never again. But it's happening right now.
Happening before our eyes, run on TikTok. And if you and I think back, you've covered some of these major stories in your career, but events like the My Lai massacre, when U.S. troops were involved in a massacre in Vietnam, it was one event, it was horrific, and it captivated the attention of the political system and the media, and there had to be an investigation, and there had to be a determination of what had happened. In the case of Gaza, My Lai is happening every single day, and there's a blase reaction. We have vivid video each day of starving people going up to food points and then being picked off by Israeli killers before our eyes. We just had a massacre of Al Jazeera reporters. Again, a targeted murder of reporters. Doesn't raise an eyebrow in the United States. No one would even mention it. There was that.
Those who do say, you look at this, and I've talked to the doctors, I've talked to political leaders, journalists, and many others, and it's just a matter of eliminating the witnesses. This is a process that was carried out during World War II. Eliminate the witnesses to our war crimes.
There's also a stunning incapacity of our government to tell one word of truth at any moment, day or night, except by accident, what is called a gaffe. But other than the Washington gaffe, you could refer to Matthew Miller, the State Department spokesman under Biden. God, I hated watching him, that smirk on his face as he denied every Israeli atrocity and as he backed every Israeli crime. Then Biden's term ended, Miller left the government, and he said, and Israel's committing war crimes. And somebody said to him, but Mr. Miller, you said the opposite when you were at State Department. He said, yes, then I was working for the government. This is the level of immorality that is pervasive in our society. And it's so normalized, no one thinks it's immoral. People think, well, of course he used to work for the government, so of course he'd say that. Now he doesn't, so of course he'd say this. Words aren't supposed to mean anything anymore. No one cares. And there's murder before our eyes. Mass murder every day. Starvation before our eyes every day. It's something different.
I think it's impunity. And I think that there's a reason the Israeli public still feels like they can back a government plan to take over Gaza, because they don't expect a reckoning for the crimes that have been committed there by the IDF. They don't expect it because it's never come before.
That's correct. That is correct. There's something very profoundly true about that. This is an impunity, an arrogance. I don't want to get too psychological about it, but a kind of revenge against the Holocaust in the mind of some of these Israeli leaders. Look what happened to us. Now we're going to show who we are. We'll kill wantonly as we like. That's what never again came to mean to them. So they're committing a genocide. They don't even recognize it, but they know that they can do it because the United States is their ally, won't say a word. If you shoot an innocent person, all you'll get out of the U.S. is Israel has the right to defend itself. That's the only cliche for mass murder.
Well, Stephen Walt joined me a couple of weeks ago here, and as he pointed out, when you look at what's going on, people look at Israel and they say, but now Israel is, they're a powerful force in the Middle East. They are, they're the hegemon, the emerging hegemon, and that all things point in that direction. But as he reminded me, they aren't. They rely completely on U.S. armaments, and they have from the start of all of this. Without U.S. weaponry, none of this would have come to pass.
We know even in the so-called 12-day war with Iran, Israel's extreme vulnerability was demonstrated because a lot of Iranian missiles got through and hit major targets in Israel. I'm inclined to think it was Israel that rushed to the United States and said, okay, stop, make the ceasefire. Israel's hardly invulnerable. In fact, I say that it dangles by a thread. The thread is the U.S. support. And while we've discussed that the U.S. support has been so far without relent, the truth is the American people as a whole are against this. And in the United States, you can go against the public view and opinion for a long time, but probably not forever. So Israel is gambling on something that it should not be gambling on, and that is that it can truly act with impunity and never hear a word from the U.S. But the American public is saying roughly by 60% to 30%, we're on the side of the Palestinians, and what Israel is doing, we oppose.
You're there at Columbia University, and we watched Marco Rubio saying that, the students will be deported, those ones that speak out, anybody supporting Hamas. And many Americans could look at that and say, well, if the guys are supporting a terror group that kidnapped Israelis, murdered civilians in the streets in southern Israel, well, I could support that. But then we welcome Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House, and Benjamin Netanyahu is the one who told his supporters, well, you got to back me here. We've got to funnel money to Hamas. And so billions of dollars went to Hamas through Benjamin Netanyahu.
Absolutely.
Because that was his way of saying, well, look, the Palestinians divided. How can I possibly negotiate peace? There isn't a single Palestinian entity that I can deal with. And that was his strategy. It was actually Sharon's strategy. Netanyahu was his acolyte. But this is the reason, perhaps, that Netanyahu wants this war to go on forever, because when it ends, there's going to be that investigation.
We had a similar occurrence, which is that 9/11 and Al-Qaeda and so forth, people who knew the background and the history knew the United States had created the jihadists. The United States had funded them. The United States had built Al-Qaeda, in essence, in Afghanistan. This was a plan that went back to 1979. support.
That was to counter the Russians.
That was to counter the Soviets at the time, and it was.
Those
but it was
were good terrorists.
Well, that's the point. That they're good as long as they do what you say, and then they're bad when they don't do what you say. And you're never supposed to find out that they once were good in your books. And so you go overboard to hide the truth. That, Osama bin Laden, yeah, the CIA used to work with him. Oh, you're not allowed to talk about that or look into that, or that Al-Qaeda had U.S. roots and covert support. Well, it's the same with Netanyahu, of course. He funded Hamas. Hamas was the great excuse.
What do you think would be the repercussions of a full investigation of what actually has gone on here? I mean, you've got Benjamin Netanyahu in 2019 addressing a closed session of Likud, but it was recorded and it was published, where he told them, hey, you got to support me. We got to funnel money to Hamas. And he was the one that was actively involved in pushing that, just as a way of preventing a Palestinian state.
We know, just even to expand on that, we know from Wesley Clark, the general who was the supreme commander of NATO forces, that in 2001, there was the famous or infamous list of 7 wars that the United States planned to fight. And this was a list that was made by neocons in the U.S. together with Netanyahu and his political advisors in Israel. And we know how Netanyahu has campaigned for all of these wars. So if we actually ever went back to investigate anything in this country, including basic things like the Iraq War in 2003, you'll see Netanyahu's fingerprints all over it. There's a very interesting book written by an Air Force commander, Dennis Fritz, last year called Deadly Betrayal. Mr. Fritz had the opportunity to read the hidden archives of the U.S., and he realized in the midst of this, oh my God, this was Netanyahu's war, concocted together with his allies in the Defense Department, Douglas Feith and Paul Wolfowitz. And the weapons of mass destruction was not a mistake, but it was an excuse, ex ante. How do we go to war? Well, we do something the American people will vaguely support. We say that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. When they weren't there, they then claimed, oh, we were wrong. They weren't wrong. They needed a cause of war. So they made a cause of war. And this was a game for them. There is, basically speaking, never accountability. That's where that hubris comes in. You get to lie and cheat, and if what you are planning doesn't work out, which is almost all the time, by the way, you just move on to the next debacle.
Focusing a little bit now inside the United States, your criticism of President Donald Trump. Is this democracy really at risk? Are the institutions that, or fragments of them that remain enough to hold?
They're not holding right now. Look at how the international trade system has been remade by one person. If you read the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, it clearly states unequivocally and unambiguously that the power to levy taxes and duties on international trade resides with the Congress, not with one person making lists, not with one person saying, I don't like what Brazil's Supreme Court is doing, I put on a 50% tariff. I don't like what India is doing buying oil from Russia, I put on a 50% tariff. We never had a country like that. We never had a president who presumed one-person rule. We never had a president that just declared emergency after emergency whenever he desired it, no justification. What is a trade deficit, an emergency 20 years on? No, not really. What is it, an emergency in District of Columbia with falling violent crime rates? No. This is one-person rule. It's happened. And our Supreme Court, so far useless. So far just in the hands of a one-person rule. Our Congress, do they exist? I don't hear from them. And our institutions are not working.
How long does it take to recover from this? You wonder, you can't unwind this. And I think that Project 2025 really had a lot to do with fixing it so they can't unwind it.
No doubt this is a long-term crisis. By long-term, I mean at least a decade, if not more. This isn't something that gets rectified in the 2026 midterms. Even if the Democrats win one or both houses, Trump is going to go on with his emergency laws and his emergency decrees. He doesn't care about Congress, and he's not going to respect Congress, and he's not going to let Congress block his way. And it doesn't necessarily stop with Trump, because this has been going on a long time. The deep state, the secrecy, the surveillance state, the military-industrial complex. After all, it is 64 years ago that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. So this is a very long story. When does it revert? Two answers. One, at the earliest in a decade or so. And the second answer is maybe never. The Roman Republic became an empire, typically dated to 27 BC. It never became a republic again. Never. It wasn't 5 years of Augustus or 25 years of Augustus. It never again became a republic. So the stakes are very high.
Now, you gave a fiery presentation at the EU Parliament earlier this year. A lot of people quoted, you were exhorting them, hey, go your own way, abandon Washington and come up with your own ideas, your own foreign policy, your own military policies for Europe. And they've responded to that. What does that mean?
Well, the one thing they haven't done is recovered any kind of diplomacy, because one thing that I told them is don't beg to be at the table when Trump and Putin meet. You go meet Putin. You're in Europe. It's a shorter flight. You don't have to wait for the United States. But that they absolutely refuse to do. They don't get it. Their diplomacy is broken. So far, not so good. Also, on trade policy, they basically gave in to Trump, said, we'll have a completely asymmetric deal, rather than saying, are you kidding? You're taking on the EU? They didn't say that. They just chickened out. When it came to NATO, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, called Trump daddy. If there was ever a question, who's subservient to who? The Secretary General of NATO called Donald Trump daddy and said, we're so happy you forced us to spend 5% of our GDP per year on the military. You know, grotesque. So, yes, that speech was widely heard. I wouldn't say that it has had all the salutary benefits that I am hoping Europe will eventually recognize. They are still very much in the hands of U.S. politics. They're desperate for U.S. protection. Instead of being desperate for U.S. protection vis-a-vis Russia, they should open direct diplomacy with Russia. That would make them a lot safer.
In the meantime, the U.S. image around the world, and I get this from people I've known for decades that still live in many of the countries of Europe and beyond, in Africa as well. U.S. stature has plummeted. I mean, doing away with USAID, ending a program in AIDS that cost next to nothing, really, when you consider the price of diplomacy. And we just abandoned hundreds of thousands of people who will probably die. And we just seem to be, he's taking it that way. And I don't see how you repair that image or reinstitute all those programs.
Well, look, the USAID roughly spent 1/10 of 1% of our national income. I mean, it's $1 out of every 1,000 to do something for poor people. And that was deemed a trifle, too much. Of course, Trump could care less whether people are dying or not dying in these countries. Didn't look, didn't care. But the amounts were tiny compared to our income, roughly $30 trillion a year for development assistance compared to 30 billion a year, compared to 30 trillion a year of GDP. So 1 in 1,000. This is kind of a statement that poor people are so insignificant. There's no amount that's too much to shower on people who are otherwise starving and dying. They just don't care in Washington. They don't care about the lives of these people, their survival, and they don't even care at all about what Thomas Jefferson once called a decent opinion, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind. The founding fathers cared what other countries thought about the fledgling United States. That's why they made a Declaration of Independence. Trump's whole point is we don't care at all what others think. And the result, they don't think much of what they see. I'm in conversations every day around the world online with leaders whose basic attitude is, whatever happened to your country? It was once a normal country, even a country we admired. Whatever happened to that, Mr. Sachs? That's what I hear everywhere.
Do you think that Mr. Trump has overreached here? I mean, he's 6 months in, not even, and he's celebrating his power. He's got, Congress under control, the Supreme Court under control. He can do anything. He's not to be held liable. He has immunity from any prosecution. He's established what is basically a revenge presidency, going after anybody that went after him for his own wrongdoing. But has he miscalculated somewhere that there will be a reckoning?
When it comes to the substantive results of what he's doing, no doubt. Alienating the rest of the world, creating these useless trade wars that have no economic benefits, only economic loss, insulting every other country in the world. No positive results from any of this, only negative. So in that kind of sense, definitely. In the sense of the politics and his own personal power and future, it remains to be seen how authoritarian things get, how much worse they get, how much crackdown he tries to impose. It's been pretty ugly so far, but it could get worse.
What keeps you up at night? What are your thoughts after you take these phone calls? You join people for little online conferences. They lay out their hearts to you about, whatever happened to the United States of America. What are you most concerned about?
Look, I always come back to one very grim image. I'm sorry to say it, but the atomic scientists already back in 1947 showed us a visual depiction of our fragility. They made what they called the Doomsday Clock to measure how close or how far we are from nuclear war and self-destruction. And that Doomsday Clock, back in 1947, when it was first published, was put at 7 minutes to midnight, meaning just 7 minutes to disaster. Today, the clock is at 89 seconds to midnight. Less than a minute and a half. So every president from Clinton onward has brought the clock closer to disaster, meaning that all these presidents, instead of serving America's security and world survival, have gone in the opposite direction. I worry a lot about it. I've been involved in public policy for more than 4 decades. I know how mistakes can be made. I know how many hotheads there are. I know how many ignorant people there are in the halls of power. It worries me a lot that this is the fact in a nuclear age, and that we have an intemperate, short-sighted president to boot.
Jeffrey Sachs, I want to thank you very much for sharing your ideas and your thoughts today, concerns. Thanks for being with us on The Brief.
So great to be with you. You know how much I admire you, so great to be with you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. Please explore many of our other episodes of The Brief Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Give us a like or subscribe. For a complete listing of all of our guests, you can find more at thebriefpodcast.org. I'm Jim Clancy, and you've been briefed. Welcome to The Brief. I'm Jim Clancy, and we're joined for this episode by Columbia University Professor of Economics, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, who says the time is now for a comprehensive peace to end the Israeli-Palestinian catastrophe in Gaza.
My whole point is that more than 180 countries at the UN are saying 2 states, side by side, on the internationally, legally recognized lines of the 4th of June, 1967. Last year, the International Court of Justice said Israel's occupation of Palestine is illegal. As we speak, Israel is committing a genocide. It is starving 2 million people to death. The behavior is beyond conscionable, beyond imaginable, frankly. The United States has stood by Israel's side every step of the way for reasons that are partly known and are, frankly, partly mysterious. Why can't the U.S. have its own foreign policy when the American people right now, roughly by a ratio of 2-to-1, support the Palestinian cause over what Israel is doing? But we don't. But almost every other country in the world does support the 2-state solution. My basic idea, by the way, is nothing profound, but that the 2-state solution should be voted at the start of any kind of peace process, not at the end. What we have done for decades is say to Israel, you have a veto. This is up to you. Israel has said, well, thank you very much. We veto. We don't want a Palestinian state. The government that's in charge in Israel right now, led by Netanyahu, comes from a political movement and a political party, which has made no bones about it. From the founding charter of the Likud party, which is Netanyahu's party, it is said that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Israel will be sovereign. In other words, there's no place for Palestine in this. What is the result? Since there are 8 million Palestinian Arabs, it is that Israel now is trying to murder them, to expel them, to starve them into submission, to do God knows what else. But the result is crimes against humanity and spreading war.
The world has looked away. How are we even capable of that after the experience of the Holocaust and World War II? When we heard everybody always saying, and they do it every year, never again. But it's happening right now.
Happening before our eyes, run on TikTok. And if you and I think back, you've covered some of these major stories in your career, but events like the My Lai massacre, when U.S. troops were involved in a massacre in Vietnam. It was one event. It was horrific, and it captivated the attention of the political system and the media, and there had to be an investigation. and there had to be a determination of what had happened. In the case of Gaza, a My is happening every single day, and there's a blase reaction. We have a vivid video each day of starving people going up to food points and then being picked off by Israeli killers before our eyes. We just had a massacre of Al Jazeera reporters. Again, a targeted murder of reporters. Doesn't raise an eyebrow in the United States. No one would even mention it.
Focusing a little bit now inside the United States, your criticism of President Donald Trump. Is this democracy really at risk? Are the institutions that, or fragments of them that remain enough to hold?
They're not holding right now. Look at how the international trade system has been remade by one person. If you read the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, it clearly states unequivocally and unambiguously that the power to levy taxes and duties on international trade resides with the Congress, not with one person making lists, not with one person saying, I don't like what Brazil's Supreme Court is doing, I put on a 50% tariff. I don't like what India is doing buying oil from Russia, I put on a 50% tariff. We never had a country like that. We never had a president who presumed one-person rule. We never had a president that just declared emergency after emergency whenever he desired it, no justification. What is a trade deficit, an emergency 20 years on? No, not really. What is it, an emergency in District of Columbia with falling violent crime rates? No. This is one-person rule. It's happened. And our Supreme Court, so far useless. So far just in the hands of a one-person rule. Our Congress, do they exist? I don't hear from them. And our institutions are not working.
That was Columbia professor Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. For more, view the full podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. And you can find links to more of our episodes at thebriefpodcast.org. I'm Jim Clancy. Thanks for joining us.